Florence, the city of art, love, and light. But between 1968 and 1985, its beauty hid something monstrous. Couples vanished in the moonlit hills. Police found their bodies hours later, shot, mutilated, and left like offerings. For 17 years, an unseen predator stalked Tuscany's lovers' lanes, taunting investigators, sending gruesome trophies, and leaving behind nothing but terror. Was he a lone sadist, a network of killers, or something more sinister buried in the heart of Italy itself? In this video, we'll uncover the real story of the Monster of Florence, one of Europe's most chilling unsolved serial murders. We'll follow the investigation from its first victims in 1968 to the shocking trials, false accusations, and the mystery that still haunts Italy to this day. Because sometimes, the darkest evil hides in the most beautiful places, and the Monster of Florence proved it. The Monster of Florence, Tuscany, a landscape painted by poets, glowing with the warmth of vineyards and olive groves, the golden sun melting into rolling hills. Florence, birthplace of the Renaissance, stood proud, its ancient stones breathing art and history. But beneath this postcard perfection, something monstrous stirred. Between 1968 and 1985, the region became the hunting ground of an unseen predator, a killer so cruel, so calculating, that his name would forever haunt Italian memory. They would call him Il Mostro di Florence, the Monster of Florence. August 21, 1968, Lastra Signa, near Florence. It was a humid summer night. Two young lovers, Antonio Lo Bianco and Barbara Loci, parked their Fiat 850 in a quiet olive grove. They were not alone. Barbara's 6-year-old son, Natalino, slept in the back seat. Sometime after midnight, gunshots shattered the stillness. 7 rounds from a .22 caliber pistol tore through the car. Antonio died instantly. Barbara was struck several times, collapsing across the seat. Her son awoke to chaos, his mother lifeless. The night filled with silence. The boy wandered into the dark countryside and, terrified, reached a nearby farmhouse hours later. Police arrived at dawn. They recovered Winchester brand .22 bullets, a detail that would one day connect this night to horrors yet to come. Investigators focused on Barbara's jealous lover, Stefano Mele, husband to the murdered woman. Under pressure, Mele confessed. He said he killed his wife and her lover out of revenge. He was convicted and sentenced to 14 years. At the time, the case seemed closed. No one imagined that the bullets fired that night would mark the beginning of Italy's longest and darkest serial murder investigation. Years passed. The 1968 murder faded from public memory. Florence thrived. Tourists returned, art students filled the piazzas, and the locals returned to their peaceful routines. But in the archives of the Carabinieri, the National Police, those Winchester bullets sat, forgotten evidence waiting for meaning. Then, in the mid-1970s, the killings began again. The victims were always couples, young lovers seeking privacy along the countryside lanes surrounding Florence. Each time, the killer struck with precision and ritualistic violence. September 14, 1974, Borgo San Lorenzo. Stefania Pettini, 18, and Pasquale Gentilecore, 19, parked their Fiat 127 under a grove of cypress trees. They never came home. When police found them the next morning, both were shot with a .22 caliber pistol, the same Winchester type ammunition as in 1968. Stefania's body bore gruesome signs of mutilation with a knife. A new terror took hold of Florence. Newspapers whispered of a maniac, a sadist, a sexual predator stalking lovers. But police didn't yet connect it to the 1968 killings. They still believed the case was solved, and that Stefano Melli's jealousy had been the motive. The pattern, however, was unmistakable. Same ammunition, same targeting of couples, same eerie calm left behind at the scene. A new phantom haunted the hills. After 1974, there was silence again. 7 long years without another attack. Then, suddenly, the killings resumed. June 6, 1981, Scondici, near Florence. Giovanni Foggi, 30, and Carmela Di Nuccio, 21, parked in a wooded area. A quiet Saturday night together. In the morning, joggers found the car riddled with bullet holes. Both victims had been shot, Carmela's body mutilated with surgical precision. The ballistic report confirmed it. Same weapon, same ammunition. The Monster of Florence was back. This time, the press gave the killer his name, Il Mostro. The city that had birthed Michelangelo and Dante was now home to a serial killer. Fear spread fast. Parents forbade young lovers from going out at night. Police checkpoints appeared along the rural roads. Still, the killer slipped through the shadows, unseen and unstoppable. The murders became disturbingly rhythmic, each attack nearly identical, as if rehearsed. Couples parked in cars on weekend nights. The killer approached silently, firing through the window with a .22 Beretta pistol. The female victim was then pulled from the vehicle and mutilated with a knife. Forensic experts concluded the killer was experienced, steady, perhaps military trained. The wounds were precise, methodical, suggesting a man who killed not in frenzy, but in ritual. Investigators began calling the scenes acts of surgical hatred. The pattern now linked the 1968, 1974, and 1981 cases into a single, terrifying sequence. Just 3 months after the Scondici murders, another couple was found dead. October 22, 1981, Colenzano. Stefano Baldi and Susanna Cambi were shot in their car, mutilated post-mortem. In June 1982, the monster struck again. Paolo Minardi and Antonella Migliorini were ambushed near Montespatoli. Paolo, still alive, tried to drive away, but crashed into a ditch. He died before he could speak. Each crime scene delivered the same message. No witnesses, no mercy, no mistakes. The monster seemed to be watching the investigators, always one step ahead. September 9, 1983, Goluzzo, near Florence. Wilhelm Friedrich Horst Meyer, a German tourist, and his companion Jens U. Rush were found dead in their Volkswagen camper. The killer had mistaken them for a heterosexual couple. When he discovered they were both men, he left their bodies intact, a chilling confirmation that his rage was directed specifically at women. The pattern was no longer just killing, it was ideology, obsession, pathology. Experts began to debate whether the monster acted alone. Some argued the precision and consistency suggested a single disciplined killer. Others believed the murders were too well-timed, too ritualistic, perhaps the work of a small group or cult. Theories multiplied. The truth remained elusive. In 1985, an anonymous package arrived at the office of Dr. Silvia Della Monica, the chief prosecutor. Inside was a small piece of human flesh, later confirmed to be from one of the female victims, Nadine Moriot, a French tourist murdered near Florence that year. With the flesh was a note, crudely written, "A gift for you, from the Monster of Florence." The letter turned horror into hysteria. The case was no longer just a police investigation. It was psychological warfare. By 1985, the monster had killed at least 16 victims across 8 double murders. The entire region lived under a pall of dread. The weapon, believed to be a .22 Beretta pistol using Winchester H series ammunition, had never been found. There were no surviving witnesses. No forensic match ever tied a single suspect to all the murders. And yet, somewhere among the olive groves and cobbled streets of Florence, the killer was still out there, watching. By late 1985, the hills of Florence were wrapped in fear. 8 double murders, 16 lives taken, not a single conviction. For the first time, Italy realized it was dealing with a serial killer on par with America's most infamous names: Bundy, Dahmer, Zodiac. But this was Florence, the heart of beauty and art. Evil didn't belong here, and yet, The evil was homegrown. Investigators worked under immense pressure. The press hounded the police daily, headlines screaming, "Who is the Monster of Florence? Is the killer among us?" Public outrage forced the authorities to rebuild the case from the ground up. Dozens of detectives from the Carabinieri and Polizia di Stato formed a task force led by Chief Investigator Michele Giuttari years later. But even in the 1980s, prosecutors like Piero Luigi Vigna and Dr. Silvia Della Monica were already fighting bureaucratic chaos, superstition, and fear. The evidence pointed in circles. Same weapon, same ammunition, same ritual mutilations. But no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no clear motive. Only a ghost with surgical precision. In re-examining old files, detectives noticed something odd. The bullets in the 1981 to 1985 murders matched the ammunition used in 1968, when Barbara Locci and Antonio Lo Bianco were shot. And who had confessed to the 1968 crime? Stefano Mele, Barbara's husband. But Mele was no monster. He was an illiterate laborer, weak-minded and easily manipulated. When questioned again, he changed his story. He now said that his wife had been part of a group of Sardinian men, all lovers of hers, and that these men might have been involved in the murders. He named Francesco Vinci, Salvatore Vinci, and Giovanni Mele, men from Sardinia who had long lived in Tuscany. Could the Monster of Florence be one of them? The police thought so. Between 1982 and 1984, several of these Sardinians were arrested, interrogated, and released. Their guns were tested, their homes searched. Nothing definitive was found. The monster, it seemed, was always a step ahead. By 1984, public terror reached its peak. Lovers no longer parked their cars in secluded spots. Restaurants emptied early. Rumors flourished. Some claimed the monster was a doctor. Others whispered about a satanic cult using body parts for rituals. The media played a dangerous game. Sensational headlines sold papers, but they also spread paranoia. When French tourists Jean-Michel Krivachvili and Nadine Moriot were found dead in 1985, the last confirmed victims, Italy erupted. Jean-Michel had been partially dragged from the tent, Nadine's body mutilated. Once again, the same. .22 Beretta was used. And then, that gruesome letter arrived at the prosecutor's office, containing a fragment of Nadine's flesh. This time, the monster wanted attention. But why stop after 1985? That question haunts Italy to this day. Police believed Francesco Vinci, one of the Sardinians, might be the killer. He owned a Beretta 22 and had a violent reputation. But tests showed no ballistic match. Vinci was eventually cleared. Then, in the early 1990s, attention shifted to a new suspect, Pietro Pacciani, a 66-year-old farmer from Mercatali, near Florence. Pacciani had a dark past. In 1951, he had murdered a man who seduced his fiancée. He served 13 years in prison. He was known locally for his temper, his cruelty toward animals, and his lewd behavior toward young women. When investigators searched his home, they found pornographic materials, newspaper clippings about the murders, and unlicensed weapons. The prosecution claimed he had both the history and the temperament of a killer. In 1993, Pacciani was charged with all 8 double murders. The trial electrified Italy. In 1994, Florence's courthouse overflowed with journalists from around the world. The monster case had become global news. The prosecution described Pacciani as a man filled with hatred toward women and couples, a sexual sadist who found pleasure in killing lovers. The defense argued there was no physical evidence tying him to the crimes. No DNA, no fingerprints, no weapon. Still, the public wanted closure. After 15 years of terror, someone had to pay. In 1994, Pacciani was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. Crowds cheered. Florence breathed again, but peace was short-lived. In 1996, an appeals court overturned the conviction. Judges ruled the evidence was circumstantial and inconsistent. Pacciani was released pending retrial. Then, in 1998, before a new trial could begin, Pacciani was found dead in his home, face down, half naked, in what police ruled an apparent heart attack. Others whispered, "Murdered to silence him." After Pacciani's death, investigators turned to two of his friends, Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti, two elderly men who lived nearby. Under pressure, Lotti confessed. He claimed he and Vanni had assisted Pacciani in several murders, holding flashlights, helping move bodies, and acting as lookouts. But Lotti's story changed constantly. He was confused, sometimes incoherent. His confession seemed unreliable, full of contradictions. Nonetheless, both men were convicted in 1998, but doubts persisted. Was Lotti simply repeating what police wanted to hear? Could these frail old men really have committed such brutal crimes? Or were they, too, scapegoats, easy targets for a nation desperate for answers? By the 2000s, the Monster of Florence had become more than a killer. He was myth, obsession, and controversy all in one. Chief investigator Michelle Giuttari and FBI profiler Douglas Preston, the American author who later wrote The Monster of Florence, reopened the case. They hoped new forensic methods might reveal the truth. But even their investigation turned surreal. Preston was questioned by police and eventually forced to leave Italy after clashing with authorities. Giuttari himself was later accused of procedural misconduct. The case had become an endless labyrinth: murders, suspects, false leads, and paranoia feeding off one another. By the 2010s, Italy's criminal police reviewed the case with modern techniques. DNA analysis was performed on remaining evidence, ballistic data rechecked, and crime scene files digitized. No definitive match emerged. The .22 Beretta pistol, the monster's key weapon, was never found. No fingerprint, hair, or fiber could be tied conclusively to any of the suspects. The theory that multiple men, perhaps a small group of sexual deviants, took turns using the same weapon gained traction among some criminologists. Others remained convinced it was the work of a lone sadist. To this day, no conclusive proof supports either side. Florence eventually returned to normal life. The vineyards blossomed again, the Arno River glittered under the Tuscan sun, and the streets filled with laughter and art. But the shadow of the monster lingers. Older residents still recall the fear that gripped their nights. They remember the checkpoints, the whispers, the newspaper photos of cars hidden among trees. The crimes remain officially unsolved. No final conviction. No justice for the 16 victims. The name Il Mostro di Florence is now etched in the annals of world crime history. A reminder that even in the most beautiful places, darkness can thrive. The Monster of Florence case reshaped Italian law enforcement. It introduced criminal profiling to Italy, inspired books, films, and documentaries, and sparked debates about media ethics and police methods. Most of all, it revealed the psychological toll of terror, how a faceless killer could fracture a nation's sense of safety and identity. Every new theory, every new suspect only deepens the mystery. Perhaps, as some investigators now quietly believe, the monster is long dead. Or perhaps he lived his final years among those who feared him most, hidden, ordinary, unnoticed. In the archives of Florence's police headquarters, the monster's file remains open. Its title reads simply, Il Mostro di Florence, Autor Ignoto. If you were captivated by this haunting story of fear, obsession, and the hunt for a faceless killer, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Spectrum, where we bring you real cases, deeply investigated, told with cinematic suspense and respect for the victims. Hit the bell icon to never miss an episode, and let us know in the comments. Do you believe the Monster of Florence was one man, or something darker, something collective, hiding behind the perfect facade of Tuscany?